What values do many Darwinian atheists call for these days? Freedom, equality, rights.
All human women's rights come and see.
The status of women according to Darwinian scientific principles. Darwin had planted the seeds of describing women as evolutionary inferior, as in his book, The Descent of Man. He had a chapter titled
Mental Abilities
For the
and
Man.
Illness.
He said that some characteristics of women are features of lower races. Then the well-known French scientist Gustave Le Bon came and said in a scientific publication, in the scientific journal Review of Anthropology in 1879, Volume 2, Issue 2, what I'm about to say is shockingly strange. So I'm providing you with the reference to review it. I have seen the literal translation of what was in the English version of the magazine with only an abbreviation, which is a natural transfer. I will say it's finished at the end, so you know it's done. Says Gustave Le Bon, in most intelligent ethnicities, as in Parisians, there is a large number of women whose brain size is closer to gorillas than the more evolved men, and this is a very clear and obvious downfall. All psychologists who have studied women's intelligence realize this, that they represent the most degraded forms of human evolution, and that they are closer to children, and the naive among them to civilized adult men. There is no doubt that there are exceptional women far superior to the average man. They are an exception like the birth of any deformed creature. For example, a two-headed lizard. And therefore, so we can completely ignore the existence of these women. Lapon's words have ended, and I apologize to the sisters following, but as it is said, the one who conveys blasphemy is not a blasphemer. And the answers, by Jerry Berman, several articles show the inferiority of women in the Darwinian perspective. And they are translated in the book, Women Between Darwinism and Atheism. From the above, I think it has become clear that it is based on Darwinian evolution that atheists adopt. No competition, no freedom, no human rights, and no women's rights. These values that they call for are undermined by Darwinism. Come now, my brothers, to discussions with the atheist. Some atheists will tell you that they do not agree with all the actions taken in the name of Darwinism and atheism, but they believe in establishing equality among humans. But, the question for them then, aren't you betraying your Darwinism with this? You thus deviate from the scientific results of Darwin's theory, in your view, under the influence of the spread of human rights and women's rights slogans. According to your Darwinism, you must be loyal to the struggle, the law of nature that brought you into this world, and not to betray the blind nature that brought you here, and not to prevent it from moving forward in the project of natural selection for the fittest. In Darwinism, there is no justification for any of them. Darwinian struggle demands that the races which see themselves as more evolved must exhibit selfish morals. Greed, selfishness, and aggression towards inferior races to annihilate them and proliferate at their expense. You atheists have two options. Either follow your ancestors and their criminal ways, the moral, according to your Darwinism, or acknowledge ethical values and equality among humans in terms of origin and reject the aforementioned Darwinian practices. So you sleep because your materialistic interpretation of the universe is not a suitable basis for moral values, as we explained in the last episode. And because borrowing morals from outside your materialistic intellectual system is your consideration, an implicit acknowledgement from you of the failure of your Darwinist materialistic system and its inadequacy in meeting human needs. When you, as an atheist, adopt human values in dealing with all races without discrimination, and when you adopt the value of mercy towards the weak, you would have engaged in unethical practices according to your Darwinism. You have done, as in the example we mentioned at first, allowed lower organisms in the evolutionary hierarchy to reproduce at the expense of the higher organisms. If we took care of loans at the expense of humanity, it would not be moral behavior. Your Darwinism makes your mercy for other species, the weak and the incapacitated, seem like this behavior. Look at your scholars who harmonized with their Darwinism and did not contradict themselves. According to Herbert Spencer, the idea of health prevention measures, state intervention in health protection, and vaccinating citizens contradicts the simplest axioms of natural selection, as well as supporting the weak or trying to protect the sick and ensuring their survival. If your scientists match their theory, how would you respond to them? And by what right do you judge them? And on what scientific basis do you build your adherence to good morals? Richard Descartes described this kind of thinking with a story. He said, Darwinism or its natural interpretations have successfully turned the moral balance upside down, provided the scientific basis for Hitler and his followers to convince themselves and their collaborators that the most heinous crimes in the world were justified. Truth is a commendable moral virtue. Then, if you Darwinians equate between the healthy and the disabled, the intelligent and the stupid, the male and the female. So what rational justification did you stop at this argument? Why don't you compare humans to chimpanzees, gorillas, and other creatures close to humans evolutionarily according to your belief? Especially since you do not believe in a unique spiritual value that distinguishes humans from animals. Francis Fukuyama says in his book, The End of History, in essence, if we truly believed that humans are just creatures in an animal chain subject to the laws of nature, not just creatures in an animal chain. Transcendent values mean that all beings must be equal in rights. Therefore, we are not allowed to defend equal rights. Brutal classism or egalitarianism. Impossible. They tell you there are atheists with good morals. So, we are not asking whether an atheist can be morally good or a believer can be morally bad. But the rational question is, does atheism lead to good morals? There is no doubt that some atheists' good morals are not due to atheism. The belief that we are in this life without purpose, without supervision, without reward for our good and bad deeds, this belief, it cannot be a motivation for good morals. But in the end, a person is influenced by a set of factors, such as upbringing in childhood and the surrounding environment. A theistic conviction is not the only factor in shaping morals. As for believing in the existence of God correctly within the Islamic conception, it drives one towards noble morals. And if a believer has bad manners, it is due to a deficiency in their faith. Not that faith caused the bad manners or led to them. The atheist is consistent with his atheism if he exhibits the worst morals and practices psychological schizophrenia and betrays his materialism if he exhibits the worst morals. With the nobility of character, the atheist says that modern science helps us identify the flaws in Darwin's theory that led to division and classism, without dismantling the theory at its core. I reiterate that this is not a place to refute Darwinian evolution, but as an answer to this point, we affirms that all creatures, including humans, are in constant evolution, which implies that there are superior and inferior races among the existing human races. Darwinians explain they might disagree on the standard of this practical differentiation. Is it by the size of the skull, the color of the eyes, the prominence of the forehead, the size of the nose, intelligence, skills, psychological makeup, etc.? But in principle, there must be a minimum and a maximum in human norms, according to Darwin, which inevitably leads to the hateful division we have seen. After all this, you understand the blessing of Islam's emphasis on the equality of humans with each other in terms of origin. O people, we have created you from a male and female and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know each other. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. This made the field of competition something that humans can strive to achieve through piety. Do not worry about the skin or the size of the lips or flatness now. And after all this, you realize the blessing of Islam, whose prophet, peace be upon him, said, there is no preference for an Arab over a non-Arab, nor for a non-Arab over an Arab, nor for a white person over a black person, nor for a black person over a white person, except by piety. And it is said that women are the counterparts of men. Praise be to Allah, who guided us to know that we were not put on this earth to relax, but to worship God, who made one of the most important ways of worshipping Him, human kindness to people, and mercy to their weak, preferring them over oneself. Peace be upon you and God's mercy.